Kind of loud.
And welcome to the first of two Inside Government shows for tonight for the fall 28 semester here at KU Community College, and broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as the college's radio station 89.1. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. At the end of next month, KU County will see a transition in one of its three Senate seats. Sen DeFrancisco, who has represented KU County since 2013 and has been a state senator since 1993, will retire after 25 years, roughly, in the state's upper house. One of our most regular guests in the last several years, Senator DeFrancisco, looked at running for governor earlier this year and made it somewhat clear to everyone that if he was going to seek the GOP nomination or not, he would likely be stepping down from the legislature. He will be succeeded in January by Robert Antonacci. We've asked the senator back in the studio to talk about his career, his future plans, the state of the state, and what is happening to the GOP in New York State. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Happy holidays. Did you have a good Thanksgiving with family? And
we did. We did. We had most of our grandchildren over, and we'll do the same for Christmas.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming back here. You've been very good to the students here since you were started representing KU County, so we're delighted to have you in the studio. So, basic of all questions, why did you decide to retire?
Well, I've been in elective office for 41 years, 26 in the Senate and 15 at the local level, and it was just time. I thought I'd take a shot at Cuomo. I thought it was time for him to go, but it became very clear that Molinaro was going to be the choice of the Republican Party, and I didn't think there'd be any prayer of anybody winning against Cuomo if there was going to be a primary. So I just once it became apparent Molinaro would be the candidate, I just said, that's enough.
Do you think Molinaro didn't seem to ever get any traction on a lot of issues? You seem to get under the governor's craw on occasion, only because...
Only because he's wrong and I'm right.
Well, I won't say that, but was there ever any chance that Republicans could have knocked off Andrew Cuomo in 2018?
I wouldn't have even attempted to get the nomination if I didn't think it was possible. The time was right. There were so many analogies to the time his father was beaten by George Pataki, and I was in the Senate at that time. Pataki and I came to the Senate at the same time, and the analogies were so great. The dissatisfaction with Cuomo was incredible. But you got to have an alternative, and the alternative was never clearly expressed by the Republican candidate this year. In my mind, he had no money that he could raise. I think we could have raised some money. I think it would have been still very, very difficult when it's 2-to-1 Democrat in the state, and you've registration-wise, and plus the dissatisfaction by downstate with Donald Trump was palatable. And so I think Cuomo, even though I thought it was crazy at the time to make his campaign about Trump, it turned out he knew exactly what he was doing, because he brought out the anti-Trump vote, not pro-Andrew Cuomo vote.
And do you have any regrets that you decided to seek the governor's nomination, or that you said, if I seek it, I'm not going to seek another term in the state legislature?
No, I don't have any regrets. You know, I've had an incredible career, 41 years. I'm unbeaten, but scored upon many, many occasions. But no, it was just time. I knew it was time. It was either going to be up or out. And and as far as regretting going after the nomination, not at all. I met a lot of great people. been this place of the state I've never been to, and I just enjoy the process. I didn't enjoy the selection process. I think it was there were some things done during the course of that process that didn't make any sense, where the rules were changed as to who's in and who's out and all this stuff. But that doesn't bother me. I'm glad. I would have been unhappy if I didn't at least give it a shot.
Did you have any worry? Was there a factor in there of a worry that you would be in the minority?
That never crossed my mind. It was either I'm going to get the nomination or I'm going to not run again. Because
were you surprised at how badly the state 7 seats?
Yes, I was very surprised.
I mean, there's a swing of 7 seats. That's an unbelievable change.
It's an incredible change. And then with the Senate, even with the addition of the Democrat Simca Felder in our conference, we only had a 1 vote margin. And if someone's not in the session, or someo's sick, or you never could, it was impossible to get things done.
You had one who was doing national service.
Which was another story entirely, how that certainly did not have to happen that way. But the fact of the matter is now they got a 7 vote margin.
Can the Republicans ever, in the short term, not the long term, but the short term, ever get that House back? The
short term is going to be very, very tough because rarely do the Republicans pick up seats in a presidential year. And next election is a presidential year. Then redistricting. And for years, the Assembly has been 2-to-1 Democrat, and with some very creative redistricting, with a 2-to-1 enrollment advantage for the Democrats, they could make it very, very difficult beyond that to take it back.
So unless Republicans really pick up something in the next 2 years, you think the next chance would be 2032?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay.
But I'm just saying they could make it much more difficult with redistricting such that it makes more and more districts heavily Democrat.
So let's go back to you. What do you think over the last 26 years has been your greatest success in the legislature?
Well, I think it's not only passing legislation, I think stopping some pieces of legislation that didn't make any sense. I think as far as the proposals recently that were passed that were mine, the prosecutorial conduct bill, I think is extremely important. We have one for judges where it's an independent body that could take complaints by individuals in the system, in the criminal justice system, that have a complaint about a judge. There's no such advantage or such avenue for prosecutors. And you've seen so many cases overturned on appeal where people were serving long sentences on serious charges that clearly there was misconduct on behalf of prosecutors, but there was no remedy. The only remedy is if you're in jail for a long time because a prosecutor didn't provide favorable information he's required by law to provide. Your remedy is suing the state of New York and the taxpayers of the state of New York, and there were multi-million-dollar settlements. And so I just think there's got to be an avenue for redress, and I think that was extremely important. That's the most recent one. The earliest one that I think was really important was ending parole for violent offenders. Right in central New York, in Camillus, a young girl by the name of Jenna was killed in Albany by someone out on parole. And people were shocked that he would be out on parole because he had a prior homicide. And the Senate had been passing bills for doing that for years. Finally, with the help of the family, we were able to get the Assembly to do the same thing. And that's still in effect, which I think is a very important bill. And there's many in between.
Do you think there was anything that you regret? Man, I wish we could have gotten this passed. There's just one thing that really would have changed New York.
Well, I think if we could have changed the manner in which economic development is operated under the Cuomo administration, you could eliminate a lot of the corruption allegations. We got to have oversight, and I had several bills with oversight that never passed, should have passed, that would have at least give a check and a balance over the unlimited authority of the governor, the way it is right now. So that, I think, was probably the most important one.
What was the toughest part of the job?
Initially, the toughest part was no matter what you do in politics, you can't please everyone. Now, I knew that going in. But the extent of the criticism in the press for a legitimate disagreement with some bills. The most obvious one was the Child Victims Act. Now, people want to be able to have individuals who were victims 20 years ago, 30 years ago, be able to sue now. and because it's such an outrageous, horrible event. And I agree it's outrageous and horrible, but there's statutes of limitations for a reason. Memories fade, witnesses die. How do many people defend themselves if somebody's making an allegation that happened 30 years ago? And I just felt that this concept of giving a 1-year period of time where you can now in this 1-year period sue somebody from 40 years ago if something happened, I think is a very, very risky and bad public policy. So that will pass in a minute by the new Senate with the Democrats, and because the Assembly's passed it repeatedly. So that I just think, you may agree or disagree with me, but when you're the front page of the Daily News and you got your picture there that says perv enabler. Now, I think that's a little extreme for someone who has a legitimate argument about a bill. That's the tough part that's really tough. But this past fall, the Business Council had their convention, and I was able to be the moderator. The program was called The Questioners Being Questioned, and I was questioning. And one of the 3 media people that were being questioned was the guy who wrote those stories in the Daily News. And it was exciting. It was almost as exciting as cross-examining people in some of the trials I've done, because he would give an answer and I'd have all his articles in my hand. And it was fun. So, but it's not fun when you see a photograph of yourself throughout the United States saying you're a perv enabler.
What will you miss most?
I think dealing with the constituents is the most important thing. I really enjoyed, like, I love the arts, and I love being involved and helping the arts with grants as I've been able to do. Same with the education system, whether it's at the primary level or at the college level. It's terrific being able to participate in some of the fundraising fund needs of those organizations.
So on the arts in itself, because you go into your office, you don't have a lot of photos of you with politicians, unlike most politicians' offices. You have a lot with artists and musicians and the arts. Is that something you, in your post-retirement from the Senate, will be spending time on, whether it's on a board or picking some arts to help along? I'm
sure I will. When I hit 50, I took saxophone lessons. And now I'm going through all the photos, trying to get them off my walls. And I saw one of my first performance. And when I was 50, I decided I wasn't going to perform for 5 years. And I actually did that for 2 reasons. Bill Clinton was president at the time, and he played sax, and I didn't want any analogies. And then
no comparisons there.
No. And then secondly, I wanted to be good enough. And so I got involved, and I haven't played lately. In fact, though, in December, I think it's the 11th, I'm going to play with a junior high school band at some event in East Syracuse. So I love the arts, and I will be involved in it in some way. I'm not quite sure how.
So besides the headlines in the Daily News, what will you miss? What won't you miss?
I won't miss the bickering back and forth in conference, trying to get the conference to move in a certain direction. You know, you're all, in our case, we were all Republicans except for one, who a Democrat was in there, Simca Felder, and it just seemed like you seem to have a consensus, and you can't move the legislation like the legislation that I was talking about earlier about checks and balances over the unlimited power of the governor, and it's the logical thing to do, and that's not even fighting with the other party on issues. That's the most frustrating.
Yeah. So let's talk about the GOP statewide for a second. It wasn't only the Senate where they got swamped. They lost at least 2 House seats, at least. What happened? Have they lost their way? Are they not coordinated? Is it just the Democrats are a behemoth you just can't fight in New York?
Well, a little bit of all of those things. The fact of the matter is that, again, in most of the states in the union, the Trump does have some positive benefits to the candidates. Not so in New York State. When you're constantly hearing negative things in the media, you're constantly...
Clearly did not help Claudia Tenney.
It certainly didn't help Claudia Tenney and John Faso, and you got a situation where the electorate is energized, and they're energized against Donald Trump, and the governor had a lot to play in that. And so that, I think, is part of it. Secondly, there's a lot of calls now for Ed Cox to be replaced. I think that's
the state GOP chairman.
That's correct, and I think that's correct. I think you know, the way candidates were picked, and I'm not just talking about myself.
But it's been the last several cycles.
Several cycles. It's a difficult thing when you're 2-to-1 underdogs in every race, but you got to have some kind of fire at the state level.
Do you see yourself playing some role in the state GOP?
Nada.
Okay.
No way. That I can say.
You know what needs to be done, but that.
Yes, I'll be happy to talk to people and what I think, but no, I'm not. If I'm retiring it all the way.
But you think the main thing is there needs to be a leadership change to start?
I think they got to have a younger person with, and being an old person myself, I admit that, a younger person that's got to put some fire in the younger generation to get involved in politics, and that's what we need. So
Bob Antonacci is your successor. You did endorse him?
Yeah, I did.
What can you tell us about him?
Well, I've known him forever. He's an accountant and an attorney, but he's a bright guy. He's a very competitive guy. He's articulate. He was clearly the candidate that was the best candidate for the Republicans to get. That's why I backed him for the nomination and all the way through the process. But we go back. I've known his mother since high school. She's in the commercial. I don't know if you
saw a couple of those commercials.
And that's, you see what you get. That's her. The whole family's that way. They're just genuine people. And so I've known the family, and they're good people, and I know we'll do a good job.
Were you surprised that that race between he and John Mannion was so close?
I was not. I think the numbers were showing like $2 million from the New York State Teachers Union. Mannion claimed that he wasn't a politician, but he's been not only a member of the teachers union, but an officer and involved in their PACs, the raising money for various candidates. And
but Bob Antonacci did end up winning Cuyahoga County.
That is correct. That is correct. But so it didn't surprise me. With that kind of money, you got to get some traction.
Are you doing any transition planning with Bob Antonacci?
Yeah, we've been talking, and a lot's going to depend upon, with the Republicans being in the minority.
So explain this. So there's a big change here. It's a twofold change. There's a new senator, which is one change, but my majority status to minority status is also a big change.
Correct. And Cuyahoga County presently has 3 Republican senators, which is unusual to say the least for a small county. And but now they'll have 3 minority candidates, or senators, and the majority makes the rules. The majority decides what goes on the calendar. The majority decides who gets what allocations for staff.
Staff-wise, space-wise.
Staff-wise, space-wise, and everything else.
Is he still going to be in the John Hughes building, is your expectation, on East Washington?
I don't know. I think he's looking to do that, but he's got to wait to see what the majority party has decided about where the space is going to be. And I assume that since Valesky's replacement is in the city of Syracuse, she would have first choice as to what office he would take. So it's basically a wait-and-see situation.
Will he likely be keeping some of your staff?
I hope so. There's some good ones, but as I say, he'll have a much smaller allocation, and who that's going to be or who would want to stay with a lower salary, I don't know.
Well, because salary's impacted as well.
Definitely. You get an allocation. You can spend it any way you want. You can spend it on 3 people or 10 people, depending upon the hours and what salaries you're paying.
Any particular piece of advice you're giving him?
I just think the most important thing is to say what's on your mind. You know, that's been my philosophy. If people don't like it, they don't like it, and they don't have to send me back. But to try to play the game of putting your finger in the air to see what way the flow is going before you make a decision, I think has killed more candidates and more elected officials.
But that's not his style anyway.
It's not his style. That's why I like him.
So you said there's going to be a new majority in the Senate. Andrea Stewart-Cousins is going to be the new majority leader. I think she was elected officially yesterday. What can you tell us about her? You've worked with her.
I've worked with her. She's a very nice woman. She's very compassionate. She's the type of person that is going to listen to all sides, I believe, before she makes a decision, and she'll listen to what the Republicans have to say. But she's still the majority leader of a Democrat conference, and they're her her first
And she's
goal.
not a New York City Democrat. She's a little north of there, correct?
Yonkers.
Yonkers. How do you see Upstate faring with this new majority? Now you have the Assembly majority, you have the Senate majority, and the governor's office all in Democratic hands. And they have not necessarily been focused, leave the governor out for a second, but the legislature and those majority minorities in the past have not necessarily focused on Upstate as Democrats.
Well, for the most part, all during my 26 years, the Assembly was 2-to-1 Democrat. The governor usually, except for Pataki, was a Democrat from New York City. When the Democrats took over the Senate for 2009, 2010, they were 2/3 of the conference or more, the majority clearly, were from New York City. And during those 2 years, as far as transportation aid, education aid, and the like, it was not good. So I got a feeling that that's not going to be the focus of the Democrat majority. Plus, philosophically, it's a much more progressive group of people where bills that were stopped in the past are not going to be stopped for good or for bad, depending upon your point of view.
So Senator Cousins was also a very big proponent of having minority representation in the budget discussions. Do you think she'll be as such a proponent when it comes to three, and I'm going to say this, 3 people in a room come January?
Nobody who's a leader wants to dilute their authority. So as far as bringing other people into that 3-person in a room, that's just not going to happen.
Do you think having a woman in the room will change the dynamic?
No, I'm not sexist at all, so I don't see the difference, man or a woman. And you know, I get the big kick out of it. They have the same issues that they have to deal with, and the same concerns that they have to take care of in doing these negotiations. So I don't care if it's a woman, a man, or whatever, because you're going to have the same problems, same issues.
Just back to Upstate, I think there's an oddity here because of something you just said. You now have the Assembly and Senate in Democratic hands. Does the governor happen to be the fallback for the chief cheerleader for all Upstate now? Does he have to be the de facto Upstate guy?
He really does, and he's already talked about that. I think one of his many quotes after the election included, you know, I'm the voice for Upstate. And he points to economic development, which, you know, whether that's a good example or not, the fact is that's what he says. So I think he realizes that there's going to be a lot of pressure for Upstate, from Upstate, to make sure that they're well represented.
So on 2 local issues, if you don't mind, we got calls. They kind of twisted the emails and the calls this way. We'd really like to say something nice about Sen DeFrancisco, so can you ask a question on our behalf, but also say thank you to him? So the first one was from an official of the Wasco Watershed Lake Association. They were very thankful for the leadership you had shown on water issues, especially in Cuyahoga County. But their corollary question of sorts was, what still needs to be done by the state on water quality?
Well, the state can allocate as much money as they want for water quality, but they got to get it out the door and make sure that it's being used. And we've gotten money in the budget before, and there's pots of money now from last year that haven't gone out the door yet. And it's extremely important that the administration uses the funds for the purposes that the locals want. They know what the problems are and how to resolve them, and I think that's the key thing that has to be done.
Another question came from an Auburn school official who wanted to thank you for your help with Auburn's finances over the years. They said you were one of those who really wanted to look at foundation aid, the formula. You were their champion. Can it be fixed?
The problem is, and I've had a bill that would have changed the foundation aid formula, and it would also have it had a little sheet of paper in the bill that all you had to do is know the wealth of the district, you had to know the population, you had to know 5 or 6 things, and you could plug in any school district throughout the state. So it was so transparent. No one could say that they're getting shafted by some language that no one knows about. That's what the beauty was. I tried to get it through my conference, it didn't go. Valesky, when the 2 years that the Senate was in Democrat hands, he's a Democrat, He took it over, and he couldn't get it passed. The problem is it's a political document. You could say this is philosophically what we want, but if you got to get the votes where someone is going to lose money in their district, it's very difficult to do.
Unless you give a major injection of new money.
That's correct, but still,
you're not going to change it.
But even a major injection of new money doesn't mean it's going to be distributed fairly if the formula's
But nobody can be caught.
That's exactly right, but it doesn't create the problem.
So there's a little. Go ahead. So there's a little talk about maybe a special session between now and end of the year. Do you expect there will be one?
I think there will. There's been 20 years since the legislature got a pay raise.
So you think it'll be specifically for the pay raise?
That's my guess.
But as I understand it, if the committee that is the commission that's looking at this makes a recommendation, as long as the legislature doesn't oppose it, it goes into effect.
That's my understanding, but then
there's
again,
a twist here.
The thing I don't know, to be very honest with you, one of the people that was selected or to be in this commission was the chief judge of the Court of Appeals. She says she's not going to do it. So I don't know how that hole was filled and what the status is right now. But it was supposed to be, it ought to go in automatically. But the twist is always going to be there's going to be something else added.
Well, and what that is, and it sounds like the governor's asked that legislators not have outside income.
Correct.
That the legislature could change. That would be a reason to go back to change that piece? Or is it all or nothing?
It's not all or nothing. The legislature could say the heck with the damn commission. We're going back because the Constitution allows us to set those salaries and set the salaries of judges and administrators as well. So the fact of the matter is that, or commissioners as well, so they don't need the commission. This is just cover for the legislature saying someone else did it, so they don't have to say you raised your own salary.
Anything else you think will be taken up in a December session?
No, and I think part of that whole thing will depend upon what the recommendation is. But I think either way, we're going to be back because there might be some little twist of something that quid pro quo for a pay raise.
And have you made a decision on whether you would support a pay raise or not?
No, I got to see what it is. If it's going to eliminate outside income, I'm definitely going to be opposed to it because I don't think you need a professional legislature that people, their only concern is whether they're going to get elected again because that's their only source of income. And I think the independence of having outside income is more important than whatever is supposed to be done by outlawing outside income.
What are you going to do after January 1st?
Well, for about 4 or 5 months, I'll do nothing other than spend a lot of time in Florida, play golf and tennis, and figure out what I want to do. I don't want to jump into anything right now.
Will you go back to practicing law?
Probably not. Probably not. I'm not so sure. My son took over my practice about 8 years ago. And I don't want to jump into something else.
Would you seek elective office again?
No. 41 years is plenty. And I think as far as, practicing law, it depends. I might grab a case now and then and do some work, but nothing full time.
So what will you do to keep busy?
I don't know. My wife is already worried about that.
I'm sure she is.
So, I've been offered to be.
She's got all these hobbies you're going to start taking up soon.
Exactly. Well, I've been offered many positions as board of director for this group and that group, and that's why I want to sit back for
What you don't know is she's calling those groups to say, please, offer them something.
She may be, but or maybe I'll just practice my saxophone and start a band.
We have sound waves here. You're always well. I don't want to speak for Professor Keeler, but I'm sure he would love to have you on sound waves.
Yep.
So we don't normally do this, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk to the public and tell them anything you want to tell them about your service to Cuyahoga County.
Well, the most important thing is thank you. I really enjoyed being in the Senate for 26 years, and in about 7 or 8 years ago when I first represented Cuyahoga County, it was really a great change for me because I got to meet great people. I got to be familiar with 4 terrific towns in the county of Cuyahoga, and all the elected officials and people that deal in those towns. Auburn was really a shock to me. I rarely came to Auburn, and quite frankly, the development that's going on here and the enthusiasm of the people of Auburn was terrific. The history, I vowed to get eventually to the Seward House during the Christmas celebrations. I have my tickets, and I'm going to be going there finally right at the last month that I'm going to be in office. So thank all of you. I really enjoyed it. I hope I did well for you, and I did the best I possibly can. And I rest assured that Bob Antonacci, who's going to be my replacement, will do well for you. He's a listener, and he's a person of action. So thank you again.
Senator Sen DeFrancisco, thanks for being here. And again, we wish you well in your next chapter in life, but we also want to thank you on behalf of the college for being a supporter not only of the college, but also of the students by making sure you made time for them. So we appreciate that. We hope you have a great holiday season. Enjoy the Seward House.
Great. Thank you.
We will be right back with Jeff Perazola, the Superintendent of Schools for the Auburn School District, who is also going to be talking about Senator DeFrancisco, and but also talking about the bond referendum that will be put before voters on January 8th. We'll also be back right after that with a special Beyond the Front Page with Hospice of the Finger Lakes. We had some technical difficulties about 2 weeks ago. We've asked them back on to finish off our season of Beyond the Front Page. Our final Inside Government show of the season will be this Thursday with our annual visit with Santa, so please join us for that. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know, please let us know your questions and thoughts for future guests on Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page for this coming spring. You can send them to cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Community College. I want to thank you for watching. We hope you stick around for Jeff Perazola and then Hospice of the Finger Lakes.